hello.
Hi.
My buddy, you're back.
I'm back.
Here we are at the New York
Where else would I
ICSC
be?
show in Javits Center. This is my crowning achievement in ICSC history, was being the person who chaired the last show when it was at the Hilton and driving everybody crazy till we moved here, and it's become this incredible bookend for the year. Being in New York, it is so busy in the city this week. You know,
City's back.
the city is back. You're out about on the streets here. It feels like we're going to have a pretty good holiday season. I know you spent a lot of time with a bunch of our retailer friends in the last few days. What is ICSC seeing? What are you seeing? How's Christmas? How's holiday shaping up?
Yeah, our forecast is for 3.5% to 4% growth. So we anticipate a strong, solid holiday season. You know, that's pretty consistent with what retail sales have been growing over the course of the year. Consumer continues to be resilient. Clearly concerned about inflation. There's no doubt about that. I think discount retail will continue to do well and be the strongest sector in retail over the course of the holiday, which has kind of been the case over the last year or two as concerns around inflation. But the consumer's been resilient, and I think as long as the job market continues to be stable, people will continue to spend.
I want to turn now to talk a little bit about ICSC's recent report about the Gen X consumer, the importance of that consumer, the emergence of that consumer. Tell everybody a little bit about the report and tell a little bit about how you think that consumer in particular is thinking about how they're spending money this holiday and into 2026.
Well, Gen X is a population cohort that we kind of view as forgotten in some extent. It's all folks between the ages of 45 and 60. It represents only about 19% of the population, so a much smaller demographic group than the baby boomers or Gen X, but a really important demographic group.
Well, they're
for
coming in
retail.
their prime spending years.
Yeah, prime spending years, 45 to 60. So while they're only 19% of the population, they're about a third of all consumer spending comes from Gen X, which makes sense because they are in their prime consumption years. They're either raising a family, they have aging parents that they're taking care of, so they're right at the inflection point of a lot of different responsibilities. They are a cohort that's destined to inherit a lot of wealth as well, so they're going to continue to have a lot of influence over consumer spending for the foreseeable future. But to your point around, the focus around value and so forth, clearly they feel that because they are in their prime consumption years and they have this multiple aspects of responsibility. So price sensitivity, very, very important to them. Value, very, very important to them. Also, efficiency and frictionless shopping is very, very important to them. It's a generation that, while not digitally native, is accustomed to technology, but also very much lived in the physical world. I mean, Gen X, I'm a Gen Xer. We grew up in the mall and we grew up shopping,
Sure.
So that's a big part of that generation. And I think to some extent, the kids of Gen Xers are Gen Zers, and what are we seeing in Gen Z? We see a generation that really loves physical shopping, heavily influenced by Gen X.
Look, I think one of the big stories coming out of the pandemic that a lot of us feel the industry got right that was overlooked for a long time was that Gen Z and millennials, to a similar extent, they're in love with going to a store.
Sure.
Now, that store may not always be in a mall anymore. That may be more, they may skew more to open air than they do to the mall or to street or to experiential. But they're clearly they're all about the in-store experience, much more so than I think most people realize.
Well, I think when you live in such a digital world and you become so accustomed to technology in so many aspects of your life, you also aspire for experience and being with people, and what better place is there than a store and a shopping center? That's a community center. It's a place for people to come together, whether it's to go shopping or going out eating or going to a movie. All those aspects have really come back into vogue.
Completely. So let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned the word digitalization. I think there's been some interesting things going on. Most recently, Kroger's announcement that they're going to move to in-store fulfillment for online orders. It feels like there is a real move now. There's a synthesizing move amongst the retailers to use the store, particularly stores that are in open-air, convenient, highway-style suburban locations, as a key component to their digitalization and their omni-channel strategy. We've known this for a long time from certain people. Target's been very open about 90-95% of their orders being fulfilled in the store. But it seems like now there's this big move to put more technology in the store as the last mile fulfillment center. Tell people what ICSC is seeing in that area.
Well, I totally agree with everything you just said. Look, I think the store has become a mini fulfillment center in addition to being used for traditional shopping. I mean, to your point around last mile fulfillment, stores are in neighborhoods. They're much easier to, it's much easier to, effectuate that shipping from the store than perhaps shipping from a fulfillment center. It's also a brand. I mean, it's a way to advertise your brand, right? I mean, people see it. Obviously, you know about our Halo report that, proves that having a store drives online sales. Closing your store decreases online sales. And so they're very synergistic. In my view, it's not one or the other, it's both. And the only channel that matters, although I get asked about online sales, I get asked about in-store sales all the time, the only channel that matters is the consumer channel. And for retailers, there are some exceptions, but generally for retailers to be successful, they have to be effective in both the digital and the physical world.
It's amazing. This year Warby crossed over to do more sales in person, live,
yeah,
in
think
IRL,
about that,
than they do online. And by the same token, over 55% of Williams-Sonoma's sales start with an online journey and finish in a store. So it's this unbelievable cross-convergence that we've seen. As we look forward now past holiday into 2026, what's your sense of how the capital markets are thinking about retail? Obviously, there's been a lot of talk in the capital markets about distress and tension in other product types, particularly skewed to office. There's been some stress around both multifamily and industrial. What are you hearing in the market? What's the house view about how the capital markets are looking at retail as we go into 2026?
Well, they're looking at retail very favorably. I mean, it's you and I know a couple of years ago that wasn't necessarily the case, but retail has really become much in favor with the capital markets. Retail's in an interesting situation because there really hasn't been a lot of net development over the course of the last almost the last 20 years, really, since the financial crisis. And so while retail sales have almost doubled and GDP's grown significantly, really retail square footage hasn't. And so into the earlier conversation we had around stores being used as really mini fulfillment centers and to fulfill online sales as well, you now have a store network that really hasn't grown, or physical footprint that hasn't grown, and the store has become in demand for multiple purposes now. So I think retail is very much in favor, and quite frankly, I don't see that supply-demand mismatch where the demand for space be in excess of the supply of space changing anytime in the foreseeable future, because the cost of development is so significant. I don't see a huge run-up in development happening in the next number of years.
One of the big REITs in our space announced that they're going to do a new development, and their projected cost is north of $500 a square foot. So if you just back into what the rent, they've got to average $45 a foot net rent. There's a big gap there between, I think, still market rents in most locations and what it would take to incentivize new development. Look, we leaned in hard this year in acquiring existing assets, largely because we believe that for the first time in probably 2 decades, not only do you have the leasing fundamentals, but at the same point in time, you have this massive gap between replacement cost and what you can buy existing assets for. And we've been highly convicted around that. It feels like the industry has probably tacked on, 30-35% more transactional volume than in 2024. What do you see going forward in 2026 in that regard?
It's tough to predict. A lot of that has to do with obviously the cost of capital and the interest rate environment and so forth. But retail, to your point, I mean, transaction volume has been up. There's been, in the last month or so, there have been some reports about commercial real estate in general, not necessarily retail, but commercial real estate transactions have started to, moderate to some extent. So we'll see what 2026 looks like. But I still fundamentally believe, in regards to the strength of retail and capital markets outlook around retail, I think it's going to continue to be strong.
Look, obviously, in the mainstream media, this has been the year of AI. We've had pretty modest concerns about, the whole data center boom crowding out capital. We haven't really seen it. We've been able to access capital quite efficiently What have you seen? What trends are you seeing in the adoption of AI in our industry that you think are interesting that could really take off in 2026?
I'm very bullish on AI. It's hard to predict what AI will look like 10 years from now. It's kind of like predicting.
I don't know that I know what it means tomorrow.
Right. It's hard. It's like predicting what the impact the internet would have had in the mid 1990s. We knew it was going to be big, but we didn't. The way it developed was a lot different than maybe we anticipated then. And I think AI is a lot like that. But I think the adoption of AI right now is going to be very focused upon efficiency, optimizing business processes, to the point where because there isn't a lot of new development, owners and operators like yourselves are going to look at how do I, run my properties in a more efficient, more optimized manner, and technology can play a part in that. Certainly AI can play a part in that. So I think that's where the focus is. I think things that are a little more, esoteric around, consumer interaction and so forth, I haven't seen those play out to the extent that people might think they have.
Well, and the reality is the internet's the right comparison, perhaps, right?
Yeah.
Which is, it took a long time for the internet to become part of the shopping consumer ecosystem. But when it did, it was quite impactful, but perhaps not in the way that we originally...
Very different than we expected it.
Before the tech bust, right? We thought it was going to be pets.com.
It's all .com,
right? And it didn't turn out that way. Well, it's interesting. I was there at the creation of when ICSC hired you. And I would have to say, I think it's been great for the industry. Your stewardship has been tremendous. But it's got to feel pretty good here what the strength of the industry is. I mean, when you came on board, we were in the height of the Amazon war, the height of the online shopping war. It's got to feel pretty good here as we come into the end of the holiday season of what the industry has really shepherded itself to be. And for all of everyone in the industry, I want to thank you because you've turned into a exceptional ambassador for all of us.
Well, thank you. We have an exceptional industry. I mean, exceptional members, leaders in this industry. I mean, we're full of great entrepreneurs, great captains of this industry that are out there leading the charge for change and for continued evolution. And it's a privilege to be in this seat. I think that I've had an incredible opportunity over the last 10 years to work with a great group of people. Not just dealing with that, but dealing with the whole so-called retail apocalypse, but also, hey, the pandemic and all that, and look where we are today. The industry is so resilient.
I don't need to be on weekly executive board calls during the pandemic. That once was enough.
Right, me too.
But it's a pleasure, man.
Always
Thanks.
a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to have you. Thank
appreciate
you.
Your friendship.
Here from the floor of the show, got to start with the boss, Tom McGee, CEO of ICSC. Thanks, everybody.